So there are different types of circulatory systems. You have one of the more complex circulatory systems, but regardless of the type of circulatory system, they all have the same purpose. Move around nutrients, move around gases, and get rid of waste. Now, when we look at some organisms, they will simply do this by diffusion. But for you, we need some sort of internal system. Diffusion is not enough. We need an internal system that's going to deal with all of these things of moving nutrients and so on around the body. In more simple organisms, we can do a basic kind of exchange through the gastrovascular cavity. And in this case, we're looking at bringing in everything that we need through a single opening. So looking at having very basic functioning of those organisms allows good diffusion. So flatworms by definition are flat, so good diffusion. And the idea that they share a cardiovascular and a digestive system all in one actually works just fine for them. Now in you, that would never work. You're entirely too large, you're entirely too complex, and you can't diffuse things through your skin well enough to actually get this to work. But between diffusion and you, we have something known as an open circulatory system. And essentially this is a very basic form of your system. We get a heart, we get some vessels, but we don't have everything closed up. In you, your blood is all contained. Okay? In these guys, we actually look at essentially some sort of watering system, basically, where the blood is flowing along the back here and is actually going to essentially drip down onto the tissues of our little grasshopper friend. Now, when this occurs, it leaves the vessels. The blood is now going to pool inside the grasshopper around the tissues, and the tissues will diffuse out what they need of oxygen and give up the CO2. But we've got to get that blood back in and so into the vessels. So the grasshopper's moving around a lot, and this will actually act like a little suction system as well. And on the other side, it will suck in blood while this side is pushing out blood. And you get a bit of a circulation, but what we see is it's not contained like it is in you. You have a closed circulatory system where everything is maintained in blood vessels in your heart and so on. And this is most common in our vertebrates, earthworms, squid, and octopus. All of the invertebrates, the bugs, things like that is going to have an open circulatory system. So in you, we have arteries. These move blood away from the heart. Veins move blood to the heart. And capillaries are between arteries and veins. It doesn't have to be a super complex system in order to get a better job done than an open circulatory system. Doesn't take much to improve on that. So fish started out simply with just a single atrium and a single ventricle. By comparison, you have two of each. 2 atria, 2 ventricle. So why do these guys get away with having just 2 chambers to their heart instead of 4? Well, based on the way their system is set up, here's the heart down at the bottom, and it doesn't look super different from yours. It's a little more simple. It's got the 1 atrium and 1 ventricle, as we mentioned. So the atrium is going to receive blood, and the ventricle is going to pump out blood. And you see it does that here. It's receiving blood from the backside of the fish into the atrium. And the ventricle is going to pump this out to the front of the fish. And in particular, it's going to pump it out directly to the gills. So these are the gills in the front. And again, you see a difference between the red, the purple, and the blue. Remember, this is not the blood changing color. Red equals high oxygen, purple equals a mix, blue equals low oxygen. So as the blood is moving through the gills, it's picking up oxygen because the gills are exchanging oxygen, carbon dioxide with the water. We saw that in the respiratory system. It's going to pump it back through or push it back through the back end of the fish where we get these capillary beds. Capillary beds are very thin and where we see the most O2, CO2 exchange because they are thin, thin-walled, very small. When we come back through to the heart, at this point we have very little oxygen left. The fish muscles and tissues have used up most of it. So the heart is going to work on pumping that blood back across the gills and start all over again. This two-chambered heart works fine for them as far as this exchange system because of the gills. But when we get into other organisms, this isn't going to work quite as well. And we start setting up two separate circuits. So in the fish, we pump to the gills, then the gills moved the blood out to the rest of the fish. This doesn't work well in larger organisms, more complex organisms. So we set up a double circulatory system, a pulmonary circuit and a systemic circuit. In respiration, we saw this already. We saw that the heart is going to pump blood out to the lungs, and from the lungs, we're going to come back to the heart, and then from the heart back out to the body. So we said the right side is part of the pulmonary circuit, or the lungs, and the left side of your heart goes out to the body. These will be important distinctions for us. We start out more simply even than you with a three-chambered heart, so we get two atria and one ventricle. This idea is that the ventricle actually will have mixed blood and is shared, meaning the ventricle is going to pump blood to the lungs, but it's also going to pump blood to the body. The best oxygen-rich blood is actually, in this case, the left atrium. Remember, when we look at these pictures, this is like you're looking down on someone who is facing you. So the right side and the left side. Be very, very careful with that. You have a four-chambered heart, two atria, two ventricle. This keeps the blood separated. There's no mixing. It's very efficient circulation. We bring in deoxygenated blood from the body into the right atrium. It moves to the right ventricle, gets pumped to the lungs. From the lungs, it gets oxygenated, returns to the left atrium, where it's pumped to the left ventricle. The left ventricle pumps it out to the entire rest of the body, including the brain, the legs, and everything in between, including the heart itself.